The rain hammered against the tall windows of Windsor Castle. Inside the grand drawing room, two women sat across from each other at a chessboard. One was Princess Catherine. The other was Queen Camilla. Between them, 32 carved ivory pieces stood silent and still. But this was not a friendly game. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her knight. She could feel eyes watching from every corner of the room. Palace staff pretended to arrange flowers. Advisors shuffled papers near the fireplace. Everyone knew what this match really meant. For months, tension had been building between the two women. Small disagreements had grown into cold silences. Public smiles hid private wounds. And now, someone had suggested this chess match as a way to settle things civilly. But Catherine knew the truth. This was a test. A public test of intelligence, composure, and worthiness. Camilla moved her pawn forward with confidence. Her expression was calm, almost bored. She had played chess since childhood. She had defeated diplomats and nobles. She expected this to be over quickly. Catherine stared at the board, her heart pounded. She had learned chess only recently, just basic moves and simple strategies. She was outmatched, and everyone in the room knew it. If you love stories of courage and unexpected victories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. The game began to unfold. Camilla took an early lead, capturing Catherine's bishop within the first 10 moves. A faint smile appeared on the queen's lips. Whispers rippled through the watching crowd. Catherine felt heat rising to her cheeks. She wanted to stand up and walk away, but she couldn't. Not here, not now. This wasn't just about chess anymore. It was about respect. It was about proving she belonged. She moved her rook, trying to remember the lessons she'd studied late at night. But Camilla countered effortlessly, tightening her control over the center of the board. Then something strange happened. A figure stepped closer from the shadows near the doorway. It was Sergeant James Whitmore, one of the royal guards assigned to the palace. He was tall, silent, and had stood at his post for hours without moving. No one paid him any attention. Guards were like furniture in royal spaces present, but invisible. But Catherine noticed him as she reached for her queen. She saw his eyes. They weren't staring blankly ahead like usual. They were focused, locked on the chessboard, and then, so subtly that no one else could see, he blinked twice. Slowly, Catherine froze. Was he trying to tell her something? She glanced back at the board, then at him again. His gaze shifted, just slightly. Toward her knight on the left side of the board, her pulse quickened. Could he see something she couldn't? Did he know chess? Camilla cleared her throat impatiently. Your move, Catherine. Catherine's fingers hovered over the queen. But instead, at the last second, she moved the knight. The piece slid across the board into a position that seemed random, even weak. Camilla raised an eyebrow. She moved her queen forward, setting up what looked like a certain victory in 3 moves. But Catherine kept her eyes on the guard, and Sergeant Whitmore, still standing perfectly still, blinked again. This time, his eyes flicked toward the far corner of the board, toward a pawn Catherine had forgotten about. She moved it, 1 square forward. The room fell silent. Camilla leaned forward, studying the board more carefully now. Her confidence wavered. Something wasn't right. The pawn had just blocked a critical line of attack. Catherine felt a flicker of hope. Outside, thunder rumbled. The rain grew heavier. And in the corner of the room, a royal guard stood perfectly still, watching, waiting, and guiding a princess toward an impossible victory. The game continued, move after move. Each time Catherine hesitated, she would glance toward Sergeant Whitmore. Each time he would give her a signal, a blink, a slight shift of his eyes. Nothing obvious. Nothing anyone else would notice, but Catherine saw it. And slowly, impossibly, the board began to change. Camilla's advantage started to slip. Her queen was forced to retreat. Her bishop was trapped. The confident smile faded from her face, replaced by a tight line of concentration. The staff stopped pretending to work. They stood still, watching. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Catherine moved her rook into position. Camilla's king was suddenly in danger. "Check," Catherine said quietly. Camilla's eyes narrowed. She moved her king to safety, but her position was crumbling. She had underestimated her opponent. Known, she had underestimated something, but what? Her gaze swept the room, landing briefly on the guard by the door. But he stood like a statue, face blank, eyes forward. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual. Camilla turned back to the board and made her next move. But it was defensive now. Desperate. Catherine felt her confidence growing. She didn't fully understand the strategy unfolding before her, but she trusted the silent signals. She trusted the guard who, for reasons she didn't yet know, had chosen to help her. 3 moves later, Catherine delivered checkmate. The room erupted. Not in cheers, but in shocked gasps and hurried whispers. Palace staff exchanged wide-eyed glances. Advisors leaned toward each other, whispering furiously. Camilla stared at the board in disbelief. Her king was trapped. The game was over. Catherine slowly stood, her legs shaking beneath her dress. She extended her hand across the table. "Thank you for the game, Your Majesty." Camilla took her hand stiffly, her jaw tight. "Well played," she said, though the words sounded forced. She stood and left the room quickly, her entourage scrambling to follow as the crowd began to disperse. Catherine remained standing by the chessboard. Her heart was still racing. She had won. Against all odds, she had won. But she knew the truth. She turned toward the doorway where Sergeant Whitmore had been standing. He was gone. The post was empty. Catherine felt a pang of urgency. She needed to find him. She needed to know why he had helped her, and how he knew so much about chess. She slipped out of the drawing room and into the hallway. The palace corridors were long and dimly lit, lined with portraits of kings and queens from centuries past. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Sergeant Whitmore. She called softly, no answer. She turned a corner and saw him at the far end of the hallway, walking toward the service staircase. His posture was rigid, professional. He didn't look back. "Wait," Catherine said, quickening her pace. "Please." He stopped. Slowly he turned to face her. For a moment they stood in silence. Catherine didn't know what to say. How do you thank someone for something they weren't supposed to do? How do you... You ask questions without putting them in danger. "You helped me," she finally said. Whitmore's expression didn't change. "I was simply standing at my post, Your Highness." "No," Catherine said firmly. "You were doing more than that. You guided every move. You saw the strategy. You knew exactly what to do." His jaw tightened. He glanced down the hallway, making sure they were alone. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I wasn't supposed to interfere." "Then why did you?" He hesitated. For the first time, emotion flickered across his face. "It's because you deserved a fair fight. And that wasn't one." Catherine stepped closer. "How do you know chess like that? Where did you learn?" Whitmore looked away, his hands clasped behind his back. "That's not a story for tonight, Your Highness. Please," Catherine said. "I need to understand." "You've risked your position to help me. The least you can do is tell me why." The guard was silent for a long moment. Rain pattered against a nearby window. Somewhere deep in the castle, a door closed. Finally he spoke. "My father taught me, a long time ago." Before everything changed, Catherine waited. She could sense there was more. Something painful. Whitmore's voice was quiet now, almost a whisper. "He was a champion, competed internationally. But he gave it all up when I was young. Had to. We lost everything." "What happened?" Catherine asked gently. He met her eyes. He made a choice to protect someone he cared about, and it cost him everything he loved. Catherine felt a chill run through her. She understood now. This wasn't just about chess. This was about loyalty. About sacrifice. About standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Whitmore shook his head. "Don't be." He never regretted it. "And tonight, watching you out there, trying so hard even when everyone expected you to fail, I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." Catherine's throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. Then without another word, he turned and disappeared down the staircase. Catherine stood alone in the hallway, the weight of the evening settling over her. She had won the match, but she had also gained something far more valuable. She had found an unexpected ally. She had learned that courage sometimes comes from the most unlikely places. News of the chess match spread through the palace like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew. Princess Catherine had defeated Queen Camilla. The impossible had happened, but with victory came consequences. Catherine woke to find her private secretary waiting outside her chambers, face pale and anxious. "Your Highness, there's been a development." Catherine's stomach dropped. What kind of development? An investigation? Into the chess match. Someone has raised questions about irregularities. The words hit her like cold water. Catherine knew immediately what this meant. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen the guard's signals, or suspected them. "Who's investigating?" she asked. "Lord Pemberton, the Queen's senior advisor." Catherine felt her chest tighten. Pemberton was ruthless, loyal only to Camilla. Was looking into the match, it meant Camilla wanted answers, and revenge. She dressed quickly and made her way through the palace corridors. She needed to find Sergeant Whitmore. She needed to warn him. But when she reached the guard station, a different officer stood at the post. "Where's Sergeant Whitmore?" Catherine asked. The guard's expression was carefully neutral. "Reassigned, Your Highness. Effective immediately." "Reassigned where?" "I'm not at liberty to say." Catherine's heart sank. They had moved him, hidden him away. Or worse, they were preparing to dismiss him entirely. She spent the rest of the morning trying to find information. The palace staff were tight-lipped. No one would tell her where Whitmore had gone. No one would even admit there was an investigation. By afternoon, Catherine was summoned to Lord Pemberton's office. The room was cold and formal, filled with leather-bound books and dark wood furniture. Pemberton sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, watching her with sharp gray eyes. "Your Highness," he said smoothly. "Thank you for coming. I'll be brief. Questions have arisen regarding yesterday's chess match." "What kind of questions?" Catherine asked, keeping her voice steady. "Questions about whether the match was conducted fairly, whether you received outside assistance." Catherine felt her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I played the game myself. Every move was mine." Pemberton smiled thinly. "Of course. But witnesses have reported unusual behavior. Specifically, they noted that you frequently glanced toward one of the guards during the match. Sergeant Whitmore." Catherine's mind raced. She couldn't lie outright. But she couldn't throw Whitmore under the investigation either. "I glanced around the room several times," she said carefully. "It was a stressful situation. I was nervous." "Naturally," Pemberton said. "But some witnesses claim they saw signals, subtle communications between you and the sergeant." "That's absurd," Catherine said, her voice firmer now. Sergeant Whitmore was standing at his post. He did nothing inappropriate. Pemberton leaned back in his chair. "Then you won't mind if we question him directly?" Catherine's blood ran cold. If they interrogated Whitmore, he would be forced to lie or admit the truth. Either way, his career would be over. "Where is he?" she asked. "That's not your concern, Your Highness." "It is my concern," Catherine said, standing up. "If you're investigating this match, you're investigating me. I have a right to know what's happening." Pemberton's eyes hardened. "What's happening is that the integrity of the royal household is being protected. If rules were broken, there will be consequences for everyone involved." The threat was clear. Yes. Catherine felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. She needed to think strategically. She needed to protect Whitmore. "I won that match fairly," she said, "and I'll prove it." Pemberton raised an eyebrow. "How?" "A rematch," Catherine said. "Another game, public, with observers from both sides. If I can win again without any guards present, that will prove yesterday was legitimate." Pemberton studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "Interesting proposal. I'll present it to Her Majesty." Catherine left the office with her heart pounding. She had just made a dangerous gamble. If she lost the rematch, it would prove she had cheated the first time. Whitmore would be dismissed. She would be humiliated, but if she didn't take the risk, Whitmore would face questioning. He would be destroyed either way. She had to find him. She had to learn the strategy herself. She couldn't rely on his signals anymore. She needed to become the chess player everyone thought she already was. That evening, Catherine searched the palace grounds. She checked the guard quarters, the training halls, even the service wings. Finally, she found a sympathetic kitchen staff member who whispered a location. The old gatehouse, east side. They've got him on perimeter duty. Catherine grabbed a cloak and slipped out into the cold night air. The East Gatehouse was a small stone building at the edge of the palace grounds, barely used except for storage. She found Whitmore standing outside, alone, his breath misting in the cold. "Sergeant," she called softly. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. "Your Highness, you shouldn't be here." "I know about the investigation," she said. "I know what they're planning to do to you." His expression darkened. "They've already done it. I've been removed from active duty, pending review." Catherine felt a wave of guilt crash over her. "This is my fault." "No," Whitmore said firmly. "I made my choice. I knew the risks." "I'm going to fix this," Catherine said. "I've challenged Camilla to a rematch, a public match. If I win, it proves yesterday was real." Whitmore stared at her. "Can't win without help, not against her." "Then help me," Catherine said. "Teach me. Really teach me. I have 3 days before the rematch." "That's enough time." Whitmore shook his head. 3 days to learn what takes years? Impossible. Catherine stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "You said your father was a champion? You learned from him? You know the strategies? You've been watching chess your whole life? Teach me what I need to know. It's not everything just enough to survive." The guard looked at her for a long moment. Rain began to fall again, soft and steady. Finally, he nodded. "Right," he said quietly, "but we do this my way. Out, and you have to trust me completely." Catherine nodded. "I trust you. Then we start now." They worked in secret. Every night after her official duties ended, Catherine would slip away to a forgotten library in the palace's north wing. Whitmore would meet her there, a chessboard already set up on a dusty wooden table. "Forget everything you think you know about chess," Whitmore said on the first night. "You're not trying to capture pieces. You're trying to control space, control the center, control the game." Catherine listened intently, absorbing every word. Whitmore's teaching style was different from the tutors she'd studied with before. He didn't just explain moves, he explained thinking. How to read an opponent, how to anticipate 3 moves ahead, how to set traps. "Your biggest advantage," he said, "is that Camilla thinks you're weak. She'll be overconfident. That's when people make mistakes." They practiced for hours. Catherine's fingers cramped from moving pieces. Her mind ached from the concentration. But slowly, patterns began to emerge. She started to see the board differently. Not as separate pieces, but as a battlefield with territories and power centers. "Good," Whitmore said when she successfully executed a fork attack, threatening 2 of his pieces at once. "You're learning." On the second night, they focused on endgame strategies. "This is where most amateurs fail," Whitmore explained. "They think the endgame is simple because there are fewer pieces, but it's actually more complex. Every move matters twice as much." Catherine practiced king and pawn endgames until her eyes blurred. Whitmore was patient but demanding. When she made mistakes, he made her reset and try again. "Why are you doing this?" Catherine asked during a brief rest. "You could have just stayed quiet. Let the investigation happen. Claim you did nothing wrong." Whitmore was quiet for a moment, studying the chessboard. "My father once told me something. He said the greatest games aren't won by the strongest players. They're won by the ones who refuse to give up when everyone expects them to fail." Catherine felt a lump form in her throat. "Is that why he stopped competing?" Whitmore nodded slowly. "He was accused of cheating in a major tournament. Someone planted evidence. He could have fought it, dragged his name through investigations, hurt a lot of people in the process. Instead, he walked away. Let them think whatever they wanted. Said some battles aren't worth winning if you lose who you are in the process." "That's not fair," Catherine said. "No," Whitmore agreed. "It wasn't. But he taught me something more important than chess. He taught me that integrity matters more than victory, that sometimes the right thing to do costs you everything." Catherine understood now. Whitmore wasn't just helping her win a chess match, he was honoring his father's legacy. Yes. Choosing to do what was right, even if it destroyed his career. We're going to win this, she said firmly. Both of us. I'm not going to let you lose your position because of me. On the third night, with less than 24 hours until the rematch, they ran full practice games. Catherine won 2 out of 5. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. You're ready, Whitmore said finally, packing up the chess pieces. What if I'm not? Catherine asked, fear creeping into her voice. What if I freeze? What if I forget everything? Whitmore looked at her seriously. Then you take a breath and remember why you're doing this. You're not playing for yourself. You're playing for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Every person who's been underestimated. Every person who's been dismissed. Catherine nodded, feeling strength return to her chest. And remember, Whitmore added with a slight smile, Camilla thinks she knows your game. She studied your past matches. She thinks you're predictable. So do the one thing she won't expect. What's that? Be fearless. The next morning arrived gray and cold. The rematch was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon in the palace's Great Hall. This time, it would be public. Representatives from the press would be present. Foreign dignitaries. Members of parliament. Everyone who was anyone would witness this match. Catherine dressed carefully, her hands steadier than she expected. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 3 days ago, she had been terrified. Now, she looked like a warrior preparing for battle. She arrived at the Great Hall 30 minutes early. The room was enormous, with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows casting colored light across the marble floor. A massive chessboard had been set up in the center, pieces gleaming under spotlights. Rows of chairs surrounded the board on all sides. Cameras were positioned at multiple angles. This wasn't just a game. It was a spectacle. Lord Pemberton approached her, his expression unreadable. Your Highness, are you certain you want to proceed with this? Catherine met his gaze steadily. Absolutely certain. Very well. The rules are simple. Standard chess. No time limit. The match continues until checkmate or resignation. And this time, he added with a thin smile, there will be no guards in the room. Only observers seated at a distance, to ensure fairness. Catherine felt a flicker of nervousness, but pushed it down. Understood. The doors opened. The audience began filing in. Diplomats in suits, journalists with cameras, palace staff trying to look professional while barely containing their excitement. And then Camilla entered. She wore a deep blue dress, her posture regal and composed. She looked refreshed, confident. She had probably spent the past 3 days resting, confident that Catherine couldn't possibly win twice. They took their seats on opposite sides of the massive board. A referee explained the rules to the audience. Silence fell over the hall. Camilla smiled across the board. Shall we begin? Catherine reached for her pawn. Her hand didn't shake. Let's. The match began. And this time, Catherine was not the same player who had sat down 3 days ago. This time, she knew exactly what she was doing. The first moves were cautious, both players feeling each other out. But then Catherine made an unexpected sacrifice, offering up her knight in exchange for better positioning. Camilla hesitated. This wasn't the timid player she remembered. She took the knight and walked right into Catherine's trap. 3 moves later, Catherine's bishop and rook were perfectly positioned. Camilla's queen was forced to retreat. The audience stirred. Whispers rippled through the hall. Catherine felt her confidence growing. She could see the board the way Whitmore had taught her. She could feel the rhythm of the game. And somewhere, she knew he was watching, believing in her, trusting her. She was going to win. Not because of signals or help, but because she had earned it. The game intensified. Move after move, Catherine held her ground. Camilla's confidence began to crack. Her moves became more aggressive, more desperate. She was trying to force a quick victory, but Catherine anticipated every attack. The audience watched in stunned silence. This was not what they had expected. Catherine wasn't just surviving, she was dominating. Camilla captured one of Catherine's rooks. And for a moment, hope flickered across her face. But Catherine had planned for this. The rook was bait, and Camilla had taken it. 2 moves later, Catherine's queen swept across the board into striking position. Camilla's king had nowhere to hide. "Check," Catherine said calmly. Camilla's jaw tightened. She moved her king, but the trap was already set. Every escape route was blocked. Every defensive piece was out of position. Catherine moved her remaining rook. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place. "Checkmate," the word echoed through the great hall. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered from every corner. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment. Diplomats leaned toward each other, talking excitedly. Even the palace staff forgot their professional composure and clapped openly. Catherine sat frozen, staring at the board. She had done it. Without signals, without help. She had won fairly, and everyone had witnessed it. Camilla remained seated, staring at the board in disbelief. Her face had gone pale. She looked like someone who had just realized they'd been wrong about everything. Slowly, reluctantly, she stood. She extended her hand across the board. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. "That was well played." Catherine shook her hand, feeling the tension in Camilla's grip. But there was something else there, too. A grudging respect. An acknowledgement that Catherine was not the weak opponent she had assumed. As the crowd dispersed, Lord Pemberton approached Catherine. His expression was carefully neutral now, all traces of smugness gone. "It appears we were mistaken about the nature of the first match," he said formally. "The investigation will be closed, and Sergeant Whitmore will be reinstated to his full duties." Catherine felt relief flood through her. "Thank you." Pemberton nodded curtly and walked away. Disappearing into the crowd, Catherine made her way through the congratulations and handshakes, barely processing the words. Her mind was elsewhere. She needed to find Whitmore. She needed to tell him the news. She finally escaped the Great Hall and hurried through the palace corridors. She found him in the east courtyard, still in his guard uniform, standing alone by the fountain. "We won," she called out breathlessly. "They're dropping the investigation. You're being reinstated." Whitmore turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine emotion on his face. Relief, pride, joy. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it?" "We did it," Catherine corrected. "I couldn't have one without your teaching." Whitmore shook his head. "I gave you the tools, but you were the one who used them. That victory was yours alone." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds above them. "Your father would be proud," Catherine said softly, "of what you've accomplished, of the person you've become." Whitmore's throat worked. "Thank you, Your Highness." "Catherine," she said. "When we're alone, just call me Catherine." He smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Thank you, Catherine." Over the following days, something shifted in the palace. The tension that had existed between Catherine and Camilla didn't disappear entirely, but it softened. Camilla stopped undermining Catherine in public. She began including her in discussions. Small gestures, but meaningful ones. Catherine later learned through palace gossip that Camilla had been testing her, pushing her to see if she would break under pressure. The chess match hadn't been about destroying Catherine, it had been about measuring her strength, and Catherine had proven herself. Not just to Camilla, but to everyone. Word of the match spread beyond the palace walls. The story was covered in newspapers and television programs. Princess Catherine's chess triumph became a symbol of something larger. A reminder that strength comes in many forms. That underestimating someone based on appearance or position is foolish. Catherine received letters from people across the country. Women who had been dismissed in their careers, young people who had been told they weren't smart enough. They thanked her for showing them that courage and determination matter more than natural talent. But the most meaningful moment came 2 weeks after the match. Catherine was walking through the palace gardens when she encountered Camilla sitting alone on a stone bench reading a book. "May I join you?" Catherine asked. Camilla looked up, surprised. Then she nodded and moved slightly to make room. They sat in silence for a moment, watching birds flutter between the rose bushes. "I underestimated you," Camilla said finally. "I assumed you were just another person playing a role. I didn't see the strength underneath." Catherine considered her words carefully. "I almost proved you right. I almost gave up during that first match. If someone hadn't believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, I would have failed." "The guard," Camilla said. It wasn't a question. Catherine tensed, unsure how to respond. But Camilla waved her hand dismissively. "I know about his help during the first match. Pemberton told me everything. But I also know that by the second match, you didn't need help anymore. You had become the player everyone thought you were. You're not angry?" Catherine asked. Camilla closed her book, her expression thoughtful. "I was, at first, but then I realized something. You didn't cheat. You learned. Someone saw potential in you and helped you reach it faster than you would have alone. There's nothing shameful in that." She stood, brushing off her dress. "We all need teachers, Catherine. We all need someone who believes in us when we can't believe in ourselves. That guard gave you a gift, and you honored that gift by becoming worthy of it." Catherine felt unexpected emotion welling up. "Thank you." Camilla nodded. "And for what it's worth, I'm glad you won. This family needs people with your kind of strength." She walked away, leaving Catherine alone in the garden. That evening, Catherine returned to the forgotten library one last time. The chessboard was still there, exactly as they'd left it. She sat down and set up the pieces, running her fingers over the smooth wood. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Whitmore appeared in the doorway. "I thought I might find you here," he said. Catherine smiled. "One more game?" He took the seat across from her. "Always." They played in comfortable silence, the only sound the soft click of pieces on the board. This time, there were no stakes, no observers, no pressure. Just two people who had learned that true victory isn't about defeating others. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is believing in them until they learn to believe in themselves. 3 months passed. Life in the palace returned to its usual rhythm, but something fundamental had changed. Catherine carried herself differently now. She spoke up in meetings. She offered opinions. She no longer felt like an outsider trying to earn her place. She knew she belonged, and Sergeant Whitmore continued his duties. Though he was no longer just another invisible guard, Catherine made sure of that. She recommended him for a promotion. He became head of security for the royal family's private quarters, a position of trust and responsibility. But their friendship remained quiet, private. They would occasionally share a knowing glance in passing, or exchange brief words when no one else was listening. The world didn't need to know the full story of what had happened between them. Some bonds are meant to stay sacred. One cold December evening, Catherine was informed that a visitor had requested to see her. Someone unexpected. Someone who had traveled a long way. She met him in a small receiving room. The man was elderly, with silver hair and kind eyes that held deep wisdom. He leaned on a wooden cane, but his posture was dignified. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for seeing me," coarse Catherine said, gesturing to a chair. "But forgive me, I don't believe we've met." The man smiled. "No, we haven't. My name is Thomas Whitmore. I'm James's father." Catherine's breath caught. The chess champion. The man who had taught Whitmore everything. "Mr. Whitmore," she said warmly. "It's an honor. Please sit." He settled into the chair with a grateful sigh. "I hope I'm not intruding. But I heard about what happened. The chess matches. How my son helped you. And I wanted to meet the person who reminded him why the game matters." Catherine felt emotion tightening her throat. "Your son is remarkable. He gave me more than chess lessons. He gave me confidence, belief in myself." Thomas nodded slowly. He wrote to me about you. Said you were the most determined student he'd ever taught. Said you reminded him of why we play it all, not for glory or recognition, but for the pure joy of mastering something difficult. He never told me he contacted you," Catherine said. "He wouldn't," Thomas said with a gentle laugh. He's private about such things. Always has been. But I wanted you to know something. When I gave up chess all those years ago, I thought I was teaching James a lesson about sacrifice, about integrity. But I was wrong about one thing. What's that? Catherine asked. I thought I was teaching him to walk away from things that aren't worth fighting for. But what he learned instead was to recognize what is worth fighting for, and then to fight with everything he has. Tomas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it, revealing a chess piece of queen, carved from dark wood and polished to a shine. This was from my first tournament victory, he said. I've kept it all these years, and I want you to have it. Catherine stared at the piece. Mr. Whitmore, I couldn't possibly please, he said gently. You've given my son something I never could. You've shown him that the lessons I taught him weren't wasted. That integrity and courage still matter. This is my way of saying thank you. Catherine carefully took the wooden queen, feeling its weight in her palm. It was beautiful, worn smooth by years of handling. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, Thomas replied. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep being brave. Keep surprising people who underestimate you. They talked for another hour. Thomas shared stories of his tournament days, of teaching James as a boy, of the sacrifices he'd made and the choices he'd never regretted. Catherine listened, absorbing every word. Feeling like she was learning secrets about the world that few people ever discovered, when Thomas finally stood to leave, Catherine walked him to the door. Will you tell James something for me? She asked. Of course. Tell him that the greatest gift anyone ever gave me wasn't the chess strategy. It was the belief that I could do hard things, that I was stronger than I thought. Thomas smiled, his eyes glistening. I'll tell him, but I think he already knows. After he left, Catherine stood alone in the receiving room, holding the wooden queen. She thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the struggle, the victory. The unexpected friendship that had changed her life. She made her way to the North Wing Library, the place where she and Whitmore had spent those 3 intense nights. The chessboard was still there, dusty but waiting. She set the wooden queen in its proper place on the board. Then she sat down and waited. 20 minutes later, Whitmore appeared in the doorway. He looked surprised to see her. I met your father today, Catherine said. Whitmore's expression softened. He told me he was coming. I tried to talk him out of it, but he's stubborn. I wonder where you get that from, Catherine said with a smile. Whitmore approached the table and saw the wooden queen. Recognition flashed in his eyes. He gave you that. He said I earned it. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. I never thanked you properly, Catherine said finally, for risking everything to help me, for believing in me when no one else did. You thanked me by becoming someone worth believing in, Whitmore replied. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Will you play me one more time? For real this time. No teaching. No holding back. Just a genuine match. Whitmore considered for a moment, then nodded. I'd be honored. They played for 2 hours. It was the most evenly matched game Catherine had ever played. Move for move, strategy for strategy, they were equals. In the end, Whitmore won. But only barely. You've become formidable, he said, with genuine admiration. I had a good teacher, Catherine replied. As they were packing up the pieces, Whitmore spoke quietly. You know, my father told me something once. He said that the most important games we play aren't the ones with clear winners and losers. They're the ones that change us. The ones that teach us who we really are. Catherine looked at him. Do you think that's what this was? I know it was, Whitmore said. For both of us. They left the library together, walking through the quiet palace corridors. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Coating the grounds in soft white, Catherine knew that life would continue to bring challenges. There would be more tests, more moments where she felt inadequate or afraid. But now she knew something crucial. She knew that strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about finding the courage to keep going anyway. And she knew that sometimes. The most powerful alliances are formed not in grand gestures or public declarations, but in quiet moments of shared purpose. in a guard's subtle signals across a chessboard, in late-night lessons in a forgotten library, in two people choosing to believe in each other when the rest of the world expects them to fail, the wooden queen sat on Catherine's private desk for the rest of her life, a reminder that the greatest victories are not the ones witnessed by crowds, but the ones that transform us from who we were into who we're meant to be. And somewhere in the palace, a guard stood at his post, knowing that he had given someone the same gift his father had given him, the unshakable belief that courage and integrity will always triumph over doubt and fear. The game was over, but the lesson would last forever.